Hello and welcome to MLOps Minutes. So in this episode, we're going to focus on setting up Azure ML. The idea is that we're going to set up a development environment in which you're the administrator. And one very important thing we're going to want is that this environment be completely ephemeral. In other words, we're going to be able to delete it at any time. Why should we do this? Because, for example, we'll be able to go on vacation, come back a month later and recreate it as before. Why do we want that? Because it's going to pull out all the MLOps best practices. Remember, the deliverable is not the model, it's how we generate the model from code and the data. Here we go. So what we're going to do is that we're going to create an Azure ML until the dataset is set up automatically with our PDFs containing cats, dogs, and others. But first, before we can do all that, we need to connect to the Azure portal. Let's get started. If you website search engine for Portal Azure, you'll find it. You'll either have to create an account or authenticate yourself. Here I have two, and I'm authenticate with my Gmail account. There you go. Here, in terms of Azure services, there's one that's pretty important. It's called resource groups. What are resource groups? They're like directories, containers that can contain one or more components. Here I clicked on Azure ML Yola, and inside I'll find a container registry, an application insight for logs, a key vault, a storage account for storing data, and an Azure Machine Learning workspace. And Azure Machine Learning relies on all these components to function. If you want to connect to it, for example, all you have to do is click on Azure Machine Learning. It displays a small Launch Studio button. A hop will launch the studio and will arrive on my workspace, which we hope will be ephemeral. For example, here I have a data tab where inside I have a data set, cat, dog, and other, that we're going to set up automatically. Here we go. What we're going to do now is return to the Azure portal. I'm going to want to create an Azure Machine Learning from scratch via the portal. I click on Create a Resource here on the left. Then I'll search for Azure Machine Learning. Voila. It'll bring up the little Azure Machine Learning icon. I click on top to create. I click on the Create button, and then I'll have several fields to fill in. The first is the name of the resource group. I'm going to create a new one, which I'll call Azure ML Demo 5, and that's it. Next, I'm asked for the name of my Azure ML workspace, which I'm going to call Cat Dogs Demo 5, and that's it. The region is quite important because it determines where your infrastructure will be installed. You should know that Azure is available just about everywhere in the world. I'll leave North Europe there, and I'll leave the names of the other components as default. I do check and create, and that's it. I'll get a validation, and Azure is deploying an Azure ML, which for the moment currently costs €0 because I don't use it. It will appear here in my resource groups. This isn't very good because I created it by hand. Now I'm going to automate it, and that's good. Azure offers a little tool called AZCLI, which can be downloaded from the internet. AZCLI will enable us to play command lines from, say, our workstation or the CI/CD. So here, I've started a little script that deals with a few commands. For example, an AZ login for authentication. Then I created some subvariables here that position several pieces of information. For example, the Azure subscription ID, the name of our resource group, the name of our Azure ML workspace, and the name of our location, in this case, North Europe. So what is subscription ID, you may ask? In fact, What happens is that I have two accounts. And so here, if I do an AZ login, it will open a web page for me to authenticate myself. I log in. And then if I use the AZ account list command, I'll be able to see my two accounts. And it'll let me know which account I'm going to deploy my infrastructure on. In this case, I'll take my Gmail address and my subscription ID will be this one. It's this ID. It's this ID that I've copied and pasted into this script. Then with AZCLI, I'll be able to make several commands. So we're going to force you to log on to this Gmail account. We'll create a resource group for the North Europe zone. Next, we need to download a little AZCLI plugin called ML to create Azure ML. So we download it and create our Azure ML workspace using only this command. And we did exactly the same thing as on the portal. So that's good because it allows me to create an Azure ML. And if I replay this script and it's already been created, it simply won't recreate it. This is practical because I'll be able to automate it in a continuous integration every time. Now I'm going to go a step further. I'm going to initialize my dataset with my PDFs. So I'm going to try and find it here. It's in the cats, dogs, others section, where you'll find a list of all the PDFs I need for my first extraction step. To create it, we're going to do it automatically. It's the same thing. To do this, I've created a little script, this time in the extractions directory called initdataset.sh. And inside we do several things. In this script, we have input parameters, i.e. the name of the resource group and the name of the Azure ML workspace. And we'll run commands with AZCLI and the AZCLI ML plugin. So here, we're going to list all datasets with the name cats, dogs, others. So this is batch scripting generated by ChatGPT. I'd like to thank him. He's very kind. This allows me to retrieve whether or not my dataset exists. If it does, I do nothing. If it doesn't exist, remember that in previous episodes I created my dataset locally. Here I downloaded it by making a git clone. Now we automate this git clone. We delete the little .git directory because it's Git's technical information and we don't want to upload it. Next, we'll issue the command AzureML create data by specifying a little file here, but YAML, that exists on my hard disk, which will say that I'm going to upload my whole directory that's here with all my PDFs with my cats and my dogs. And it will automatically create this dataset for me. As a result, this script will work under Windows and Linux. Why is that? Because I've created a .sh, so it's a script that's normally supposed to work on Linux. But to make it work on Windows, we use git bash, which lets you execute .sh files. So if I want to run it from my machine, I just have to do setup AzureML.ish. And then automatically it will start doing my Az login. I guess it opened my browser. I validate my login. It authenticates me. We're on my subscription with my Gmail. And then I think he started the command that creates the resource group. Since this one already exists, it's going to go pretty quickly. He'll try to download the ML extension if it doesn't exist, linked to the AZCLI tool, and so on. And automatically, if my environment doesn't exist, it will recreate it from scratch. And that's exactly what we want. In other words, I have no problem going to Azure. Now I'm going to take my resource group. I'm going to take this one at random. I want to delete it. We're going to take one that I actually use. Here I'm going to go to it. I'm going to delete the resource group. Here, copy, paste, and that's it. My environment, this whole container full of resources, will disappear. Thank you and see you soon for more videos.